Everyone, and welcome back to yet another video from my channel, Interactive Education, running for the best education possible from the student to the student for a better experience. And today we will be continuing the chapter Reproduction in Organisms for the 10th standard. And today we will be continuing our course on asexual reproduction. We were discussing asexual reproduction in the last video, but we were left with two more forms of asexual reproduction. So we'll be continuing this unit of asexual reproduction in this video. Right, so we discussed what was asexual reproduction. We looked at 4 of the 6 forms of asexual reproduction, right? And we looked at the meaning of asexual reproduction. We saw that asexual reproduction is basically a form of reproduction which involves only one parent who gives its genetic material to the offspring, right? And there are various forms of asexual reproduction. We looked at all of them. And please look up that video if you have not done so before you move further on with this, because we've discussed most of the topic in that video. But anyway, let's now move on to the two forms of reproduction, asexual reproduction, which are left off. That is, both will be discussed today. So the 5th form of asexual reproduction, which we will be discussing, is regeneration. Okay, so as the term suggests, this form of asexual reproduction basically involves regenerating, rejuvenating, reforming, right? So it basically means that an organisms cut parts. Organisms cut parts, regenerate or regrow into new individuals. So basically, if the parts of an organism, for certain organisms, this does not happen with every organism, but only with a bit of lower organisms. So basically, sometimes some organisms they get cut because of some reason. Okay, it's maybe because they've been cut by some sharp object or whatever. They've undergone some injury and have cut. So because of that cut, they've divided into several parts. Now these parts actually grow back into new individuals, right? They regain the lost parts and they grow into new individuals, and this is what we call regeneration. Let's look at an example of regeneration. The most prominent example is Planaria. And we know Planaria, we've studied Planaria in our last year's chapter, Diversity in Living Organisms. And Planaria is basically a worm-like structure, right? Planaria. It's, I think, part of the phylum. I believe it's part of Platyhelminthes, but I'm not that sure. Maybe Platyhelminthes or Coelom. That there was Platyhelminthes, maybe, but I'm not that sure because yeah, I think it's part of Platyhelminthes. Yes, it's part of Platyhelminthes, right? Or Coelenterata, either Coelenterata or Planaria, but Coelenterata or Platyhelminthes, but I think it's part of Platyhelminthes. Anyway, Planaria basically is it's an Animalia species, and it looks something like this. Okay, so it's basically, it looks something like this. It has a tail kind of structure and whatnot. Okay, something like this. It looks something like this, right? That's your Planaria, an example of the Planaria. Now this Planaria sometimes gets cut. So suppose this is an axis by which this Planaria has been cut. Okay, so these are 2 axes on which the Planaria has been cut, and now this Planaria distributes, or the cut parts of the Planaria, okay, they look something like this. So you see that the Planaria has been cut, and now it is in these parts. So suppose this is the head part which has been cut. Okay, then this is the middle piece of the body which has been cut. and then the tail of the body is there, which has been cut, right? So you see that the planaria has been cut into 3 parts. But any normal organism would die at this stage. It would not survive, right? But this does not happen with the planaria. The planaria's parts which have been cut actually regenerate and regrow their lost body parts to form a new organism. And let's see how that happens. You can see that this part, or let me make a straight line, this part here will develop, right? So I'll be showing the original parts with my same color, but the regrown parts I will be showing with yellow. So you see, now this was the part which it already had, but now it develops a middle piece, right? You see it develops a middle piece and it also develops a tail. So you can see here it has developed this part right here, and it has also developed this part. So it develops these parts. Similarly, we have the same thing going on with the middle piece. It regains its head. It regains its head, right? It already has a middle piece, and it also, regains its tail. So you can see that it has regained its parts again. If you look at the tail, also it regenerates. If you see the tail, it too regenerates. How? Let's see. It will regenerate it already has a tail, right? The tail is still present. Now the tail is present, right? Tail is already there. But this tail then acquires the other 2 missing body parts. So if you see, it acquires the middle piece. See, the middle piece is acquired, and then it also acquires the top part of the body. That is the head. So you see, this is how planaria reproduces. It gets cut into various parts, but ultimately it develops into 3 new planarians. So actually, in Hindi, or not in Hindi, I would say in Indian culture, there's a very famous language, or there's a very famous belief of a new birth. So biologically speaking, this is a form of new birth, right? The planarians die, but they come back alive. So that's what we can call this rebirth of the planaria. And this is an example of regeneration. I wish, and many people wish, and many biologists wish that, could we have had regeneration? What could we have done? And if we had regeneration, a lot could be done. People could get their lost hands, and those whose lives have been, completely changed because of these problems could have now got a new life, right? But now, sadly, that has not happened. Let's see, maybe biology and evolution will get that for us, right? So let's move on now anyway. Now we come to the longest and most detailed part of the this reproduction process. Let's have a look at that, right? Shall we? Now, asexual reproduction has one very complex form, right? And that's called vegetative propagation. It's the 6th form of asexual reproduction, and that is vegetative propagation. Now, vegetative propagation, what does this term mean? Let us first look at the term and understand something. Vegetative. Looking at the first word of the form of reproduction, you can very easily understand that this is an asexual form of reproduction, most common in plants. It is commonly performed by plants, right? It is most common in plants. You hardly find this in any organism other than plants. So it usually occurs in plants, and propagation. Vegetative propagation basically refers to the development of new plant bodies or new plants and their bodies from existing plant parts. What does this mean? Let's see. Well, basically this means, now let's have a look at first a common understanding, right? We all know that new plants grow from seeds, right? These seeds then germinate, they give, they break their dormancy, ultimately they generate roots, okay, then they grow into new plants and this and that. So there is a growth, there is a germination process from seeds, okay? That's very, very a common understanding. We've been learning this for many years. But we have seen, and many scientists have observed, that even without the seeds, plants can be grown. And that is what we call vegetative propagation. Let's take an example. And the best example I would like to take is bryophyllum. Now, bryophyllum is basically, it's a type of leaf. Okay, it's a type of plant. And if you look at its leaf, right, if its leaf is seen, if you look at its leaf, right, we can look at its leaf. So if we look at its leaf, right, you see, and seen, right, it's seen that on the tips of the leaves, right, on the tips of the leaves, there are certain buds, right, on the leaves of the bryophyllum. It's seen that on the tips of the leaves, there are certain buds, and from these buds, it has been seen that different, the same plant, that is, some parts of the bryophyllum appear to grow. So usually the leaves of the bryophyllum, they appear to grow. So it is seen that different, leaves and plant parts, they appear to grow from them, right? So when you see them grow, right, you see that leaves start growing on the tip of the bryophyllum leaf. And this, here you can see there's no seed, right? There's no seed from which a new plant part is generating or from a new plant part is developing. It is from a leaf of the plant. So this form of reproduction, asexual reproduction, where development of new plant parts takes place from the bodies of existing plant parts. Now you know that there's a plant, basically there will be a plant here and it's a part of the plant, right? The leaf is a part of the plant. So on the tip of the leaves there are buds, and these buds are growing to generate new plant parts. And this form of asexual reproduction is called vegetative propagation. Another example of vegetative propagation would be potatoes. Now we know some of us love these things, and these are potatoes, right? I love them personally. I love potato chips and I love potato things which you find. Potato is a very common thing in Indian culture to be used in cooking, and I love potato. So this potato, if you look at a potato closely someday, a raw potato, you will see that there are some, gaps or depressions, maybe called, right? There are these things on these potatoes, right? And these parts or these things are called eyes of the potato. Don't think that they're used for seeing. The potato can't see, but they are called eyes of the potato. And they also act as some kind of buds. Okay, we can say they act like buds. So what exactly happens is that these buds, if you keep this potato underground, so if you keep it underground, okay, it has been seen that from these buds or from these eyes of the potato, from some of the eyes of the potato, roots start generating. Yes, that's true. If you try it someday, it actually happens. Some plant roots start generating and even shoot starts generating. So you see a shoot starts generating and a root starts generating. So you see there is a development of a plant from one vegetable, which is nothing but a part of a plant, right? So this development takes place without any seed, without anything. It's just a natural part of the potato which contains buds, and from here you have development of these plant parts. Again, this is an example of vegetative propagation. Right? I hope this is clear to each and every one of you. Now let's just look at some examples of vegetative propagation. Some very prominent examples are strawberries. You'll see strawberries are developed by vegetative propagation. A lot of varieties of strawberries are developed by vegetative propagation. Rose, a lot of varieties of rose, the flower rose, are developed by vegetative propagation, right? There are so many. There is potato itself, which you've seen, that is developed through vegetative propagation. You will see that the bryophyllum leaves, okay, and the bryophyllum, they are developed by vegetative propagation, right? So these are some very, very important things which are associated with vegetative propagation, and this is what happens exactly in vegetative propagation. Now, vegetative propagation is mainly of two types. There are two kinds of vegetative propagation. There is natural vegetative propagation, NVP, and there is artificial vegetative propagation, AVP. Natural vegetative propagation is where the plant parts are generating naturally. You are not doing anything specifically, modifying the plant or doing anything to generate vegetative propagation. It occurs naturally. Example of this is bryophyllum, right? A great example of this is bryophyllum. And artificial vegetative propagation is where you're doing some modifications to purposely generate vegetative propagation. Example, no need for an example for now, but there are further three kinds of artificial vegetative propagation. There is layering, there is cutting, and there is grafting. Layering, cutting, and grafting, right? So layering basically involves a layer. You are putting a layer, right? So I would tell you how this is basically done. Layering and cutting and grafting. Layering is basically done, in a very, strategic manner, and it's a very complex process, basically used to generate newer varieties of fruits. So it's a very common, way of generating new varieties. And if we have a good variety of a fruit, we use it to further grow that fruit, right? It's a very common way. Cutting, again, what we basically do in cutting is that we take, I'll show it somewhere here. We take one plant part which is growing very well, okay? So there's a plant which is growing very well. Suppose there's a plant which grows really well and one of its branches grows really well, right? It has a lot of leaves and this and that. It's very, very long, right? What we do is we take this branch and somewhat submerge it in the soil, right? We submerge it in the soil and a point comes where this, it is put through the soil and it grows further into a newer plant, right? So we basically submerge this very good plant. This good plant's very long branch is submerged under the soil, then it's taken out and a very good plant is generated, and a point comes where this part of the plant is submerged in the soil, grows its own roots. When this time comes that it generates its own roots, this long branch which was associated to this tree is cut off. And when we cut off this particular branch, then it has generated into an independent plant. So this particular part is now an independent plant. So this is what we call cutting, right? Again, it is used for example, if you have a good variety of strawberry and I want to grow that good variety of strawberry further, it is used. So again, good varieties of fruit. Right, that's what it helps us in. Another example. Now grafting. Grafting is again another way of artificial vegetative propagation. What we basically do in this is that we take one this thing, right? We take one part or one plant, that one plant is taken, and we tie it, grafting. Let me tell you how we do grafting, right? So basically in grafting, we take one plant part, right? We take one plant and another plant is taken, right? Another plant. So let me take another color. So we take one plant and we take another plant, and these two plants are tied together. They are connected together. Okay. So we connect these plants together, right? Now this helps us in growing both the plants and whatever things are produced. Suppose the fruit or whatever produce, timber, whatever product we get, they have the mixed properties of both plants. So they connected together, tied together, maybe the roots are put inside. So this is a very commercial process, and in this process we get a mixed property of whatever we are producing. So if we get a fruit, usually we don't, but what if we get a fruit, then it has a mixed property of both of them. If we get some produce, it has a mixed property of both of them. So basically it involves giving a mixed property, and it is a very commercialized, it is a commercial commercial activity. We do it as a commercial activity so as to get a good produce, get good properties of what we want, right? So that's with your grafting. Okay, so I hope that's clear. NVP, that is natural vegetative propagation, and artificial vegetative propagation, right? That's with that. Now last topic in this form of reproduction, asexual reproduction, is the advantages of vegetative propagation. There are many advantages of vegetative propagation. We'll be looking at some of them. First, the offsprings, right, or whatever we are producing, right, the offsprings have very similar characteristics to that of parents. Now, you might be thinking that we discussed this when we first of all discussed asexual reproduction. But let me make it clear. In asexual reproduction, we may have, and we just may have, a little scope for variation. But in vegetative propagation, I can say that there is 0.0001% of variation, because you're just developing that particular plant part, and obviously it's going to give rise to the same type of plant. So there's a very little scope of variation in this form of asexual reproduction. Next is, it helps in getting desired properties. So if you have a great strawberry plant, right, you have an excellent strawberry plant, but after a point it's stopped, you can't get other it's unique, it's just beautiful, you can't get more of it. And if you grow other strawberry plants, you see that they don't give you as well and as well germinated, well produced strawberries as compared to that particular plant. So you want to get more strawberries from that plant. So what you can do is, you can practice the cutting process. You can generate another strawberry plant from that particular strawberry plant itself. So it's going to have similar characteristics, and we will get that desired form of strawberry we want, right? So that's one of the major advantages of vegetative propagation, right? Number 3, it helps in agricultural growth. So if you see, if you can even give an economic twist to this, it largely helps the agricultural sector. It is one of the major things which is practiced in agricultural sector. It helps not only biology but also economy. So that's something really important. So these are some 3 advantages of VP, that is vegetative propagation, right? Very important, and it comes for a lot of marks, and it is pretty important, right? So with this, we conclude this session on asexual reproduction, and we have actually completed asexual reproduction. We are done with asexual reproduction now, right? So now In the next video, we will be looking at the next form of reproduction, that is sexual reproduction. Right? Thank you very much for joining me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any doubts, they are most welcome in the comment section below. Thank you very much for joining me. Goodbye. Stay healthy, stay smart, and do keep studying. Bye-bye.